The locket felt heavy in Willow Garrison's palm, despite weighing almost nothing, the gold catching the merciless Arizona sun as she stood outside the general store in Ventura, trying to summon the courage to part with the last piece of her mother she had left. Her stomach cramped with hunger, reminding her that sentiment was a luxury she could no longer afford, not after 3 days without a proper meal and 2 weeks since her father had died from fever, leaving her alone in a territory that showed no mercy to orphaned women. She pushed through the door, the bell chiming above her head like a funeral toll, and approached the counter where Mr. Henderson stood counting coins, his weathered face barely registering her presence until she placed the locket on the scratched wooden surface between them. "I need food," Willow said, hating how her voice cracked on the words, hating the desperation that clung to her like the dust from the road. "Anything you can spare for this." Henderson picked up the locket, squinting at it in the dim light filtering through the store's grimy windows. He opened it, studying the faded daguerreotype of her mother inside, then snapped it shut with a decisive click. "Gold-plated, not solid. I can give you a loaf of bread, some jerky, and a small bag of beans." It was worth more than that. They both knew it, but Willow had no position to negotiate from, not when her knees felt weak and her vision kept swimming at the edges. She nodded, swallowing against the tightness in her throat as Henderson disappeared into the back room. The locket sat on the counter, seeming to catch every beam of light, and Willow had to look away from it, fixing her gaze instead on the wanted posters tacked to the wall beside the door. The bell chimed again, and she heard the heavy footfalls of boots on the floorboards, the jingle of spurs that marked a man who spent his days in the saddle. Willow kept her eyes down, years of her father's warnings about strange men echoing in her head, but she could feel the newcomer's presence like heat from a stove, could sense him studying her even as Henderson returned with a bundle wrapped in brown paper and twine. "Here you are, miss," Henderson said, pushing the package toward her while his other hand closed around the locket, pulling it toward his side of the counter with possessive finality. Willow reached for the food, but another hand got there first, larger and sun-bronzed, with calluses that spoke of hard work and long hours. She jerked back, her heart hammering, and finally looked up into the face of the man who had interrupted her transaction. He was tall, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of the sage that dotted the hills around Ventura, green-gray and startling in their intensity. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most, with the kind of face that would have been handsome if not for the serious set of his jaw, and the lines of concern etched between his brows. His clothes were dusty from travel but well-made, his hat expensive, and there was something about the way he carried himself that spoke of authority, of a man accustomed to being heard. "Hold on," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in Willow's chest. He picked up the locket, examining it with far more care than Henderson had shown, then looked at Willow with an expression she could not quite read. "This was your mother's." Willow wanted to demand how that was any of his business, wanted to snatch the locket and her food and flee, but something in his tone made her pause. "Yes," she said quietly. "She died when I was 8. It is all I have left of her." The stranger nodded slowly, turning the locket over in his palm before looking at Henderson. "This is worth considerably more than bread and jerky, and you know it, Henderson." The shopkeeper's face reddened. "Now see here, Mr. Granger, I am running a business, not a charity house." "The girl came to me. I did not seek her out." "Adam Granger," the stranger said, ignoring Henderson and extending his free hand to Willow. "I own the Double Bar Ranch about 10 miles north of here." Willow hesitated, then took his hand, feeling the strength in his grip, the warmth of his palm against her own cold fingers. "Willow Garrison," she managed, pulling her hand back after a moment that somehow felt both too long and not long enough. "Please, Mr. Granger, I do not need anyone's charity. The trade was fair enough." Adam Granger shook his head, placing the locket deliberately back in her palm and closing her fingers around it. "No, Miss Garrison, it was not fair, and I cannot stand by and watch a woman be cheated, hungry or not." He turned back to Henderson, fishing a worn leather wallet from his jacket. "Put together a proper order. 2 weeks' worth of supplies for one person. Flour, cornmeal, beans, rice, coffee, sugar, salt, bacon, dried beef, canned goods, whatever vegetables you have that are still fresh. And add a good blanket, those nights are getting cold." "Mr. Granger, I cannot," Willow started, but he held up a hand. "Can you cook, Miss Garrison?" The question caught her off guard. "Yes, of course. My mother taught me before she died, and I have been keeping house for my father since then." "Can you mend clothes, do laundry, tend a garden?" "Yes, but I do not see what." "Then it is not charity," Adam said, his tone gentling slightly. "I am in need of a housekeeper. My previous one, Mrs. Chen, moved to California 3 months ago to live with her daughter, and I have been making do with my own poor cooking and bachelor habits since then. The house is in a sorry state. I am down to my last clean shirt, and I burned the stew so badly last week that I had to throw out the pot. If you are willing to work, I am willing to pay fair wages plus room and board." He paused, studying her face. "And I promise you will be safe. I have 3 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, and all of them are decent men. You will have your own room with a lock on the door, and my word as a gentleman that you will not be bothered." Willow's mind raced, trying to process what was happening, trying to spot the trap because there had to be one. Men did not simply offer women jobs and protection without expecting something in return. But when she looked into Adam Granger's eyes, she saw only sincerity and something that might have been concern, nothing of the leering calculation she had learned to recognize in the eyes of other men who had approached her since her father's death. "Why?" she asked bluntly. "You do not know me. I could be a thief, or worse." Adam smiled for the first time, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and impossibly handsome. "You were willing to sell your most precious possession for food rather than steal it from Henderson's shelves, which I notice are positioned where he cannot see them all from the counter. That tells me you are honest. You are clearly educated. Your speech is refined, which suggests good upbringing. And anyone who has been through what you obviously have and is still standing deserves a chance." He pulled out several bills, laying them on the counter. "Besides, I meant what I said about needing help. The ranch is doing well, but I cannot manage the house and the land both, not properly." Henderson was already gathering supplies, apparently happy to take Adam's money regardless of the circumstances. Willow stood frozen, clutching the locket, trying to decide if she was about to make the best or worst decision of her life. The logical part of her brain pointed out that she had few other options. She had been sleeping in the livery stable, sneaking in after the owner left for the night and leaving before dawn, and she knew it was only a matter of time before she was caught. She had no money, no prospects, and winter was coming to the Arizona high country, where the nights could be brutally cold despite the warm days. "What are the wages?" she asked, because she needed to maintain some dignity, some sense that this was a business arrangement and not rescue. $30 a month, plus room and board," Adam said without hesitation. "Sundays off if you want them, though I would appreciate a cold lunch prepared the night before." It was more than fair. It was generous, actually, far more than most housekeepers made. Willow knew she should be suspicious, but hunger and exhaustion were making it hard to think clearly, and the idea of a safe place to sleep, of regular meals, of not having to worry about what would happen to her, was almost overwhelming. "I accept," she said before she could talk herself out of it. "When would you like me to start?" "Right now, if you are able," Adam said. "I came into town for supplies anyway. We can load up the wagon and head back to the ranch, unless you have belongings you need to collect." Willow thought of the small bundle she had hidden in the livery, containing one extra dress, her father's broken pocket watch, and a few other worthless personal items. "I have a few things. It will not take long." An hour later, Willow sat on the bench seat of a sturdy wagon, her bundle at her feet and a mountain of supplies secured in the bed behind her. Adam handled the reins with easy competence, guiding the two horses out of Ventura and onto the dusty road that wound north through the scrubland. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, but there was a breeze that made it bearable, carrying the scent of sage and creosote and something else, something green that hinted at water somewhere ahead. They rode in silence for a while, Willow too overwhelmed to make conversation, and Adam seemingly content with the quiet. She studied him from the corner of her eye, taking in details she had missed in the store. He had good hands, steady on the reins, and he sat with the relaxed posture of a man completely comfortable in his own skin. There was a small scar on his left temple, barely visible beneath the hair that fell across his forehead, and another on the back of his right hand, white against his tanned skin. "How did your father die?" Adam asked suddenly, startling her. "If you do not mind my asking." "Fever," Willow said, the word still sharp in her mouth even 2 weeks later. "It came on fast. One day he was fine, working at the assay office where he was a clerk, and 2 days later he was dead. The doctor said there was nothing to be done, that some fevers just take people like that." She swallowed hard. "We had a small house on the edge of town, but it belonged to his employer. They gave me 3 days to clear out after the funeral. No other family, none living. My mother was an only child, and her parents died before I was born. My father had a brother, but he died in the war. There was no one else." Adam was quiet for a moment, then said, "I am sorry. That is a hard thing, to lose everyone." There was something in his voice that made Willow look at him more closely. "You have lost people too, my parents," he said. "Both of them, 5 years ago, in a fire that took most of the original ranch house. I rebuilt, but it is not the same. My sister lives in Denver with her husband, and we write, but I do not see her often. So yes, I understand something of being alone." They fell silent again, but it felt different now, less like two strangers and more like two people who had found an unexpected common ground. The landscape rolled past, red rock and sparse vegetation giving way gradually to grassland as they climbed into the foothills. Willow spotted cattle in the distance, grazing peacefully, their brands too far away to read. "Those are mine," Adam said, following her gaze. "Or some of them anyway. I run about 500 head, which is not huge by some standards, but enough to keep me and the hands busy. We trail them to market twice a year, spring and fall, and sell to buyers from back east. It is good land here, better than it looks. There are springs in the hills that keep the grass green most of the year, and the cattle fatten up well." He was trying to put her at ease, Willow realized, filling the silence with information that painted a picture of stability and success, of a life that was solid and real. She appreciated it, even as part of her remained wary, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The ranch house appeared as they crested a low rise, and Willow caught her breath despite herself. It was beautiful, a sprawling structure of adobe and wood with a wide porch that wrapped around at least 2 sides, shaded by an overhang that would make it comfortable even in the worst heat of summer. There were outbuildings scattered around it, A barn that looked new, corrals with strong fencing, a bunkhouse set a respectful distance from the main house. Trees grew near the house, cottonwoods and willows that spoke of water, and she could hear the trickle of a stream somewhere close. "The house is bigger than I need," Adam said, bringing the wagon to a stop near the porch. "4 bedrooms, a kitchen, a dining room, a parlor, and a room I use as an office. I know it probably looks like a mess inside. I apologize in advance." He jumped down and came around to her side, offering his hand to help her down. Willow took it, acutely aware of the contact of how small her hand felt in his. Her feet touched the ground, and she swayed slightly, the long ride and her general weakness catching up with her. Adam's other hand came up to steady her, gripping her elbow gently. "When did you last eat a real meal?" he asked, his voice sharp with concern. "I had some bread 4 days ago," Willow admitted. "Before that, I am not entirely sure. Things have been difficult." Adam's jaw tightened. "Come inside." "Supplies can wait. You need food now." He guided her up the porch steps and through the front door into a hallway that was mercifully cool after the heat outside. True to his word, the house showed signs of bachelor neglect, dust on the surfaces. Boots kicked off haphazardly near the door, a stack of newspapers that had clearly been read and tossed aside, but it was fundamentally sound, well-built and spacious. The furniture was good quality if mismatched, and there were touches that spoke of the family that had lived here before the fire. A sampler on one wall, stitched with a Bible verse. A formal portrait of a stern-looking couple who had to be Adam's parents. A shelf of books that looked well-read. The kitchen was large, dominated by a cast-iron stove and a sturdy table that could easily seat 8. Adam pulled out a chair and practically pushed Willow into it, then went to work with the efficiency of a man accustomed to taking care of himself, if not particularly well. He built up the fire in the stove, filled a kettle with water from the pump at the sink, and rummaged through a cupboard until he found a can of beans and some dried beef. "This will not be fancy," he said, dumping the beans into a pot and adding some of the beef, along with water and a generous amount of salt. "But it will be hot and filling, and you can have as much as you want." Willow watched him work, still half convinced she was dreaming, that she would wake up in the livery stable to find this had all been a hunger-induced hallucination. But the chair beneath her was solid, the house smelled of dust and old smoke and coffee, and Adam Granger was very real as he moved around the kitchen, his spurs jingling softly with each step. "Why did you really help me?" Willow asked quietly. "Please tell me the truth." Adam glanced at her, then returned his attention to the pot, stirring the beans as they began to heat. "I told you the truth. I do need a housekeeper. But if I am being completely honest, I also could not stand the thought of you selling that locket, of you losing the last piece of your mother because Henderson is a greedy bastard who takes advantage of people when they are desperate." He paused, then added, "My mother loved jewelry. Not expensive things, just little pieces that meant something to her. After she died in the fire, I managed to find one of her rings in the ashes, melted and bent but still recognizably hers. I wear it on a chain under my shirt. So yes, maybe I projected my own feelings onto your situation, but that does not make the job offer any less real or the need any less genuine." It was the most honest answer anyone had given Willow in a long time, maybe ever. She felt something loosen in her chest, some of the constant tension that had been her companion since her father's death. "Thank you," she said softly. "For the food, for the job, for giving me back my mother's locket. Thank you." Adam nodded, dishing up a large bowl of beans and beef and setting it in front of her, along with a spoon and a tin cup of water. "Eat slowly," he cautioned. Your stomach will not be used to food after days without. I do not want you getting sick." The food was plain but good, hot and savory, and Willow had to force herself to follow Adam's advice and eat slowly when what she wanted was to devour everything in front of her. He made himself a bowl as well and sat across from her, eating without speaking, giving her space to process everything that had happened. The light through the kitchen window was turning golden, late afternoon sliding toward evening, and Willow realized with a start that, for the first time in weeks, she was not terrified about where she would sleep that night, whether she would be safe, whether she would eat. The relief was so intense it almost hurt. "I will show you your room after you finish eating," Adam said, breaking the comfortable silence. "It was my sister's before she married. It has a good bed, a wardrobe, a washstand. There is a bathing room too, which is a luxury, I know, but my father had it put in after my mother complained about hauling water to a tub one too many times. We have our own well, deep and reliable, so water is not an issue." "A bathing room," Willow repeated, trying to remember the last time she had been able to bathe properly. "That sounds like heaven." "I will heat water for you," Adam offered. "Tonight just settle in. Tomorrow will be soon enough to start working. You look exhausted." Willow wanted to protest that she could begin immediately, that she needed to prove herself worthy of his generosity, but the truth was she could barely keep her eyes open. The combination of food, safety, and the emotional toll of the day was crashing over her like a wave. "Thank you," she said again, the words inadequate but all she had. After she finished eating, Adam showed her through the house, pointing out where things were kept, explaining the quirks of the stove and the pump and the various doors and windows. The room that would be hers was at the back of the house, with windows that looked out over the stream and the cottonwoods. It was simply furnished but clean, with a quilt on the bed that looked handmade, depicting a pattern of interlocking stars in blues and greens. The wardrobe was empty except for a few old dresses that Adam said had been his sister's, left behind when she moved. "They might fit you," he said, looking embarrassed, "or you could alter them if they do not. Sarah was about your height, maybe a bit heavier. She would not mind, I am sure." Willow ran her hand over one of the dresses, a simple calico in a soft brown that would be perfect for housework. "I could not. They are just sitting here otherwise," Adam pointed out. "Please take what you need. I will heat water for a bath, and then I need to go check on the horses and talk to the hands. Let them know you will be starting tomorrow. There is food in the kitchen if you get hungry again, and your room has a lock, as I promised. You are safe here, Miss Garrison. I give you my word." He left, pulling the door closed behind him, and Willow sank onto the bed, testing its softness. It was comfortable, far more so than the piles of hay she had been sleeping on, and the pillow was plump with feathers. She lay back, just for a moment, and felt tears slide from the corners of her eyes into her hair. They were not tears of sadness exactly, but of relief so profound it felt like grief. The release of tension she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to be without it. A knock on the door roused her some time later, and she realized she had dozed off. Adam's voice came through the wood, respectful and distant. "Miss Garrison, the water is ready in the bathing room. I will be outside if you need anything." Willow found the bathing room, which was indeed a luxury, with a large copper tub already filled with steaming water, and a bar of soap that smelled like lavender resting on a small table beside it. She locked the door, stripped off her filthy clothes, and sank into the water with a sigh that came from her very soul. The heat soaked into her muscles, easing aches she had stopped noticing, and she scrubbed herself until her skin was pink, washing away layers of dirt and fear and desperation. When she finally climbed out, she felt like a new person, or perhaps like her old self emerging from beneath the grime of survival. She dried off with a towel that was rough but clean, then put on one of Sarah's old dresses, which fit reasonably well with only a little extra room in the waist. Her own dress was beyond saving, she decided, fit only for rags. Night had fallen by the time she emerged from the bathing room, the house lit by oil lamps that cast warm pools of light. She heard voices from outside, Adam talking to someone in the easy tones of friendly conversation, and she made her way back to her room, suddenly overwhelmed by shyness at the thought of encountering him again now that she was clean and wearing borrowed clothes. She locked her door as he had said she could, then lay down on the bed properly this time, pulling the quilt up over herself. Through the window, she could see stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, more stars than she had ever seen in town, a field of brilliant points that seemed close enough to touch. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and another answered, their voices wild and lonely and somehow comforting in their familiarity. Willow fell asleep with her mother's locket clutched in her hand, with a full stomach and a clean body and a locked door between her and the world. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she did not have nightmares. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee wafting from somewhere in the house. For a moment she was disoriented, unable to place where she was, and then memory returned in a rush. The ranch, Adam Granger, the job. She sat up quickly, panicked that she had overslept, that she had already failed in her duties, but when she looked out the window, the sun was still low on the horizon, the morning fresh and new. Willow dressed quickly, braiding her hair and pinning it up in a simple style, then made her way to the kitchen. Adam was there, pouring himself a cup of coffee from a pot on the stove, and he looked up when she entered, his face breaking into a smile. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well. There is coffee, and I was about to make breakfast, though I warn you my skills are limited to eggs and bacon, and I burn the eggs more often than not." "Please, let me," Willow said, moving toward the stove with relief. This she could do, this was familiar territory. "You hired me to cook, after all. It is time I started earning my keep." Adam stepped back, surrendering the kitchen to her with obvious relief. "I will not argue. The chickens are in the coop behind the house. Eggs should be gathered daily. Bacon is in the cold box along with butter and milk. We get deliveries from a dairy farm about 5 miles east every few days. Flour and other staples are in the pantry, which is through that door." Willow explored the kitchen as he spoke, familiarizing herself with the layout, pleased to find it well stocked despite Adam's claims of bachelor living. She gathered eggs from the coop, marveling at the fat hens and the well-maintained structure, then returned to make a proper breakfast. Scrambled eggs with butter and salt, bacon fried crisp, biscuits from scratch using the sourdough starter she found in the pantry, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Adam ate with the appreciation of a man who had been subsisting on his own poor cooking for too long, complimenting every dish and going back for seconds. 3 men appeared at the back door as they were finishing, ranch hands who introduced themselves as Jose, Tom, and Ben, all of them polite and respectful, taking off their hats when they spoke to Willow and thanking her for the food she offered them from what was left of breakfast. "We eat in the bunkhouse usually," Tom explained. He was the oldest, maybe 40, with gray threading through his dark hair. "But Mr. Granger said you would be doing the cooking now, so we wanted to introduce ourselves and say we appreciate it. We have been taking turns and none of us are worth a damn at it, begging your pardon for the language, miss." "I will have lunch ready at noon," Willow said, already planning the meal in her head, taking stock of what was available. And dinner at 6, if that suits everyone." The men agreed enthusiastically and headed back out to their work, leaving Willow and Adam alone again. He poured them both more coffee and sat back down at the table, watching her as she began clearing the dishes. "They are good men," he said. "Jose has been with me for 3 years, Tom and Ben for 2. They work hard, do not cause trouble, and they will respect you. But if any of them do or say anything that makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately." "Understood," Willow nodded, touched by his protectiveness. "Understood." "But they seem kind." "They are," Adam agreed. "But I want you to feel safe here. That is important to me." He left to begin his own work shortly after, and Willow threw herself into cleaning the house with the fervor of someone who had been given an unexpected second chance at life. The work was hard but satisfying. Each room she cleaned and organized representing a kind of reclamation of order from chaos. She found a rhythm, methodically moving from room to room, sweeping and dusting and scrubbing, washing windows until they sparkled, beating rugs until the dust made her sneeze. The house responded to her efforts, seeming to come alive under her hands. By midday, when she paused to make lunch for everyone, the main rooms were transformed, no longer looking like a bachelor's neglected domain but like a real home. She made stew from beef and vegetables. Serving it with fresh bread, she had somehow found time to bake, and the men ate with noises of appreciation that made her feel warm inside. Adam caught her eye across the table and mouthed, "Thank you," and Willow felt her cheeks heat with a blush she could not quite explain. He had a way of looking at her that made her feel seen, truly seen in a way she had not experienced before. It was not leering or inappropriate, just attentive, as though he was genuinely interested in her as a person rather than as a convenience or a problem to be solved. The days fell into a pattern after that. Willow rose early, made breakfast, spent her mornings cleaning and mending and managing the household, cooked lunch, spent her afternoons on whatever projects needed attention, made dinner, and then had her evenings to herself. Adam was often around the house for meals but spent most of his time working the ranch, riding out with the hands to check on cattle, mend fences, deal with the 1,000 small crises that came with managing livestock and land. They talked during meals, tentative conversations at first that gradually deepened into something more substantial. Willow learned that Adam had inherited the ranch from his father when he was 24, that he had worked as a cowhand for other ranches before that to learn the business, that he loved the land with a passion that was almost poetic when he spoke about it. She learned that he had been engaged once, to a woman from Prescott, but she had broken it off when she realized she could not handle the isolation of ranch life, and he had not seriously courted anyone since. "I suppose I am married to the ranch," he said one evening, a touch of sadness in his voice. "It is not a bad life, but it can be lonely." Willow understood loneliness, had lived with it as her constant companion since her mother died. She told Adam about her childhood, about how her mother had been a teacher before she married, how she had taught Willow to read and write and figure, how she had dreamed of her daughter having opportunities she herself had missed. She told him about her father, a quiet man who had never quite recovered from his wife's death, who had done his best to raise Willow but had always seemed lost, as though part of him had died with his wife. "He loved her very much," Willow said. "He never remarried, never even looked at another woman. I used to think it was romantic when I was younger, but as I got older I realized it was also sad. He was so focused on the past that he could not fully live in the present." "You think that is wrong?" Adam asked, genuinely curious. "To love someone so much that you cannot move on?" Willow considered the question. "I think it is human," she said finally, But I also think we are meant to keep living, even after loss. My mother would not have wanted my father to spend his life mourning her. She would have wanted him to be happy. "And what do you want, Willow?" Adam asked, using her first name for the first time, the sound of it in his voice sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. "What makes you happy?" It was a question no one had asked her in so long that she had to think about the answer. "This," she said slowly, gesturing to the house around them, to the kitchen where they sat. "Safety, purpose. Knowing that I am needed and valued. Having enough to eat and a place to sleep. It sounds simple, but after the past few weeks it feels like everything." "It does not sound simple to me," Adam said quietly. "It sounds like the things everyone deserves and too few people have. I am glad I can provide them for you." Something shifted between them that night, an unspoken acknowledgement that they were becoming more than employer and employee, more than two people sharing a house. Willow felt it in the way Adam lingered over coffee after dinner, in the way he asked her opinion on matters related to the ranch, in the way he smiled when he came into the kitchen and found her there. She felt it in her own responses, in how her heart beat faster when she heard his footsteps on the porch, in how she found herself taking extra care with her appearance in the mornings, in how she looked forward to meal times when they would sit and talk. She had been at the ranch for 3 weeks when the first real test of their growing bond came. A storm rolled in from the west one afternoon, dark clouds piling up against the mountains, the air turning electric with the promise of rain. Adam and the hands rushed to get the cattle to shelter and secure the outbuildings, working against the clock as the storm approached. Willow watched from the kitchen window, seeing the lightning flash in the distance, counting the seconds until thunder rolled across the land. The rain hit like a wall of water, torrential and violent, driven by wind that rattled the windows and made the house creak. Willow lit lamps against the premature darkness and kept dinner warm on the stove, hoping the men would return soon. An hour passed, then another, and she began to worry, pacing the kitchen and peering out into the storm, seeing nothing but rain and wind and occasional brilliant flashes of lightning. When the back door finally burst open, Adam stumbled in, soaked to the skin and supporting Tom, whose face was twisted in pain. Blood stained his shirt, bright red against the wet fabric, and Willow sprang into action without thinking, grabbing towels and helping Adam get Tom to a chair. "What happened?" she demanded, already pulling back Tom's shirt to examine the wound. It was a deep gash across his ribs, bleeding freely but not spurting, which meant no major vessels were hit. "Barbed wire," Adam said, his voice tight. "The wind took down a section of fence and Tom got tangled in it when we were trying to secure the cattle. Jose and Ben are still out there, finishing up. I need to get back, but I could not leave Tom bleeding." "Go," Willow said, her hand steady as she pressed a towel against the wound. "I can handle this. But bring hot water and the medicine box before you leave, and tell me where the doctor is in case I need him." Adam obeyed, moving quickly despite his exhaustion, bringing her what she needed and giving her directions to the doctor's house in Ventura. "If it gets worse, if he develops fever or the bleeding does not stop, you send Ben for the doctor immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes," Willow said, meeting his eyes. "Now go help the others. We will be fine here." He hesitated, then leaned down and kissed her forehead, a quick press of his lips that was over almost before it began but left her skin tingling. "Thank you," he said, and then he was gone, back out into the storm. Willow focused on Tom, cleaning the wound with water and whiskey that made him hiss in pain, then stitching it closed with careful, even stitches. Her mother had taught her basic doctoring, skills that all frontier women needed, and she was grateful for the lessons now as she worked by lamplight, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "You are good at this," Tom said through gritted teeth. "Where did you learn?" "My mother," Willow said, tying off the last stitch and bandaging the wound with clean cloth. "She said you never knew when you might need to save someone's life, and she was right. This should hold, but you need to rest and keep it clean." "I will check it every day, change the bandage, make sure it is not infected." Tom nodded, his face pale but grateful. "Mr. Granger is lucky to have found you, miss. We all are." Willow helped him to the bunkhouse once the worst of the storm had passed, then returned to the house to wait for Adam. He came in hours later, exhausted and still wet, and found her in the kitchen with coffee and stew waiting. He ate in silence, too tired for conversation, and Willow simply sat with him, her presence a quiet comfort. "Tom," he asked finally. "Sleeping," Willow reported. "The wound is clean and stitched. He should heal fine if he rests and does not tear the stitches. I will keep an eye on him." Adam nodded, rubbing his face with both hands. "You were amazing today. I do not know what I would have done if you had not been here. Thank you, Willow." "You do not need to thank me," she said softly. "This is my home too now. Of course I would help." Adam looked at her, really looked at her, and Willow saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Is it?" he asked. "Your home, I mean. Do you feel that way?" "Yes," Willow said, realizing as she spoke that it was true. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, this ranch, this house, had stopped being a refuge and had become home. And Adam had stopped being just her employer and had become something else, something she was not quite ready to name but could feel growing stronger every day. "Yes, I do." "Good," Adam said, his voice rough with emotion. "Because I do not want you to leave, Willow. Not ever, if I am being honest. I know it has only been a few weeks and maybe it is too soon to say this, but I need you to know how I feel. You have brought this house back to life, brought me back to life in ways I did not even realize I needed. I look forward to coming in from work because I know you will be here. I find myself thinking of things I want to tell you, stories I want to share, questions I want to ask. And I know I am your employer, and there is a power imbalance there that makes this complicated, but I cannot help how I feel. I am falling in love with you, Willow. Maybe I already have fallen, and I needed you to know." Willow's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Everything was happening so fast, too fast. Her logical mind screamed, but her heart was singing a different tune. She thought about the past 3 weeks, about how safe she felt here, how valued, how seen. She thought about Adam's kindness, his integrity, the way he treated her as an equal despite their different stations. She thought about how her pulse raced when he smiled at her, how she found excuses to be in the same room as him, how the house felt empty when he was gone. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered, the admission both terrifying and liberating. "I did not think I would ever feel this way about anyone, but you have been so good to me, Adam. You saved my life that day in the general store, and you have given me a home and a purpose, but more than that, you have given me hope. I feel like I can breathe again, like the future is not just something to survive but something to look forward to. And yes, I know it is fast and maybe it is crazy, but I do not care. I love you." Adam was out of his chair and pulling her to her feet before she finished speaking, his hands cupping her face as he looked down at her with an expression of such joy that it took her breath away. "May I kiss you?" he asked, ever the gentleman, and Willow nodded, rising on her toes to meet him halfway. The kiss was everything a first kiss should be. Gentle and sweet and full of promise, his lips soft against hers, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious. Willow's hands found his shoulders, gripping the wet fabric of his shirt, and she felt the world narrow down to just this moment, just the two of them, everything else falling away. When they finally pulled apart, Both of them were breathing hard, and Adam rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I want to do this right," he said. "Court you properly, give you time to be sure. I do not want you to feel pressured or obligated because I gave you a job. I want you to choose me freely with no doubts." "I already have," Willow said, but she understood what he meant. "But I will accept your courtship, Adam Granger, because you are right that we should take our time and be sure, though I do not think time will change how I feel." "Nor I," Adam agreed, kissing her once more, quick and sweet. "But let us do this properly. Let me take you to church on Sunday. Let me introduce you to people as the woman I am courting. Let the world know my intentions are honorable." And so they courted, though they lived in the same house and saw each other every day. Adam treated Willow with old-fashioned respect and deliberation. He brought her wildflowers from the hills, presented to her shyly over breakfast. He asked her to accompany him on rides around the ranch, showing her the land he loved, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his childhood. He took her to Ventura on Sundays, to the small church where the town gathered, and introduced her proudly to neighbors and friends, his hand possessive on the small of her back. The town gossips had a field day at first, speculating about the young woman who had appeared from nowhere to live at the Granger ranch. But Adam shut down any unkind talk with a glare that could freeze water. "Miss Garrison is my housekeeper and the woman I intend to marry," he told anyone who asked, and also a few who did not. "I will thank you to treat her with the respect she deserves." Willow met his sister Sarah when she came to visit in early November, traveling from Denver with her husband William and their 2 small children. Sarah was a whirlwind of energy and opinions, embracing Willow like a long-lost friend despite having just met her. "Thank God," Sarah said fervently, pulling back to look Willow up and down. "I have been so worried about Adam out here alone, refusing every woman I tried to introduce him to. But you are perfect. I can see it in how he looks at you, how you have transformed this house. It feels like home again, like it did when our mother was alive. Please tell me you are going to marry him and put him out of his misery." "Sarah," Adam protested, his ears turning red. "You cannot just—" "I can and I did," Sarah said, unrepentant. "Well, Willow, are you going to marry my brother?" Willow looked at Adam, who looked mortified and hopeful in equal measure, and smiled. "Yes," she said simply. "When he asks me properly, I will say yes." Adam asked her that night after Sarah and William and the children had gone to bed in the guest rooms. He led Willow out onto the porch, where the November air was cold and crisp, the stars brilliant overhead. He took both her hands in his expression serious and tender. "Willow Garrison," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion she could see in his eyes. "I know we have only known each other for 2 months, but they have been the best 2 months of my life. You have brought joy and light and love into my world, and I cannot imagine going back to how things were before you. I love you with everything I am, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband, your partner, your home?" "Yes," Willow said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Adam, I will marry you. I love you so much." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Willow felt her heart soar. When they finally pulled apart, Adam reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, simple gold with a small diamond that caught the starlight. "It was my grandmother's," he said, slipping it onto her finger. "My mother gave it to me before she died and told me to give it to the woman I loved. I think she would have loved you, Willow. I know you would have loved her." Willow looked down at the ring, then up at Adam, and felt a sense of rightness settle over her like a blanket. This was where she was meant to be. This man was who she was meant to love. Everything that had happened, all the pain and loss and fear, had led her to this moment, to this place, to him. They were married in January. in the church in Ventura, with half the town in attendance and Sarah serving as Willow's attendant. Willow wore a dress that had belonged to Adam's mother, altered to fit her by Sarah's skilled hands, and carried a bouquet of winter flowers that Adam had somehow found despite the cold. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Adam kissed her with such joy that the congregation burst into applause. The celebration continued at the ranch, where tables had been set up in the barn, and Willow had spent days preparing food with help from Sarah and several women from town who had befriended her. There was music and dancing and toasts, and through it all, Adam barely left Willow's side, his hand finding hers, his eyes seeking her out across the room, his smile constant and bright. When the guests finally left and they were alone, Adam carried Willow over the threshold of their bedroom, the one that had been his parents' and was now theirs. He set her down gently, then cupped her face in his hands. "I love you," he said. "I will love you for the rest of my life and beyond. You have made me the happiest man alive, Willow Granger. And you have saved me in every way a person can be saved," Willow replied, standing on her toes to kiss him. "I love you, Adam. Thank you for giving me back my mother's locket. Thank you for asking me to stay. Thank you for loving me." "Always," Adam promised. And then there were no more words, just the two of them together, beginning their life as husband and wife. The years that followed were not without challenges. Ranch life was hard, with droughts and harsh winters, with cattle diseases and market fluctuations that sometimes left them struggling financially. But they faced everything together, Adam and Willow, partners in every sense of the word. Willow proved to be as skilled at managing the ranch's accounts as she was at managing the household, and her careful budgeting saw them through the lean times. Adam expanded the herd gradually, never overextending, always cautious, and the Double Bar became known as one of the most reliable ranches in the territory. Their first child was born in late autumn of 1885, a boy they named James after Adam's father. He had Adam's green-gray eyes and Willow's dark hair, and he was healthy and strong, filling the house with noise and chaos and joy. Willow proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving, and Adam was besotted with his son, often found holding the baby and talking to him about the ranch, about the land, about all the things they would do together when James was older. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, born during a spring thunderstorm that rattled the windows and made Willow laugh despite the pain of labor. They named her Clara after Willow's mother, and she had her grandmother's delicate features and her father's smile. Adam declared her perfect and proceeded to spoil her shamelessly. Though Willow tried to maintain some discipline, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew, healthy and happy, learning to ride almost before they could walk, spending their days exploring the ranch under the watchful eyes of their parents and the ranch hands, who all doted on them. Tom recovered fully from his injury and remained with them, as did Jose and Ben, and they hired additional hands as the ranch grew, creating a community that felt like an extended family. Willow never forgot where she had come from, the desperation that had driven her to sell her mother's locket. She made sure the pantry was always full, that there was always extra food that could be shared with travelers or neighbors in need. When word reached them of families struggling, Willow would appear with baskets of supplies, never making a fuss, always matter of fact about it. "We have been blessed," she would say when Adam praised her generosity. "It is only right to share those blessings." The locket remained Willow's most treasured possession, aside from her family. She wore it always, the weight of it against her heart, a reminder of her mother, of where she had been, of how far she had come. Sometimes she would open it and look at the faded daguerreotype, and she would tell her children stories about the grandmother they would never meet, about the woman who had taught her to be strong and kind and brave. Adam added his own portrait to the locket, opposite Willow's mother, so that the two people who had shaped Willow's life most could always be together. "Your mother brought you into the world," he said, "and I have been blessed to share your life. It seems fitting that we should both be in there, close to your heart." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Adam took Willow back to Ventura, to the general store where they had first met. Henderson had retired and the store was under new ownership, but Adam had arranged with the new owner to have a small plaque mounted on the wall. "In this place, two lives intersected and love began. January 1885. Willow cried when she saw it, happy tears that Adam kissed away. "I never want to forget," he said, "how lucky I was that day to walk into this store and find you, to have the chance to give you back what was yours and to ask you to stay. It was the best decision I ever made, Willow, the best thing I ever did." "We saved each other," Willow said, squeezing his hand. "I came here desperate and alone and you gave me hope. But Adam, you were alone too in your own way. We needed each other. We found each other. That is not luck, that is fate." They stood there in the store, holding hands like young sweethearts, until the owner coughed politely and suggested they might want to make a purchase. Adam bought Willow a new pair of gloves, soft leather that fit perfectly, and Willow bought Adam a new hat to replace the battered one he refused to give up. They walked back to where they had left the wagon, arms around each other, and drove home to the ranch, to their children, to the life they had built together. More years passed, measured in the growing of their children and the expanding of their ranch. James grew into a fine young man, serious and responsible like his father, with a natural affinity for the cattle and the land. Clara was spirited and clever, always asking questions, always wanting to know how things worked and why. They were joined by another son, Henry, born when Willow was 32, a surprise baby who came into the world laughing and continued to find joy in everything around him. The double bar prospered under Adam and Willow's management, becoming one of the most successful ranches in Arizona territory. They added more land, built a new barn, improved the irrigation system so they could grow more of their own feed. Other ranchers came to Adam for advice, and Willow became known for her hospitality, her table always open to neighbors and friends. Through it all, the love between Adam and Willow only deepened. They were partners in every sense, sharing the work and the decisions, supporting each other through difficulties, celebrating each other's triumphs. They still made time for each other, for quiet evenings on the porch after the children were in bed, for rides out to their favorite spots on the ranch, for conversations that ranged from the practical to the philosophical. "You ever regret it?" Adam asked her one night, years into their marriage, giving up the possibility of a different life, of living in a city maybe with more society and culture. Willow looked at him, surprised by the question. "Never," she said firmly. "Adam, I have everything I want right here. I have you, I have our children, I have this land and this home. What more could I possibly want? My mother taught me that happiness is not about what you have or where you are, but about being with the people you love and doing work that matters. I have that. I have more than I ever dreamed possible. I just want you to be happy," Adam said, pulling her close. "You deserve happiness, Willow. You deserve the world. You are my world," Willow said simply, and it was true. This man, this life, this family they had created together, that was her world, and she would not trade it for anything. As their children grew and started families of their own, the ranch evolved to accommodate the next generation. James married a rancher's daughter from Prescott, a capable woman named Elizabeth who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the northern edge of the ranch and worked the land alongside Adam and Willow. Clara surprised them all by falling in love with a teacher who came to Ventura to start a school. And though Willow worried at first about her daughter marrying someone unused to ranch life, Daniel proved to have a gift for managing the business side of the operation, helping them navigate contracts and markets with an ease that freed Adam to focus on the land itself. Henry, true to his joyful nature, became the heart of the family, the one who organized gatherings and celebrations, who made sure everyone stayed connected even as the family spread across the ranch. He married young, to a woman from California who had come west with her family, and they filled their house with laughter and music and children of their own. Willow and Adam became grandparents, then great-grandparents, watching their family grow and flourish across the land they loved. The Double Bar was no longer just a ranch but a legacy, a place where multiple generations of Grangers lived and worked and loved. Willow made sure that each new child born into the family heard the story of how she and Adam had met, of how he had given back her mother's locket and asked her to stay, of how love could grow from the smallest acts of kindness. The locket itself became a family treasure, passed down to Clara on Willow's 60th birthday, with the understanding that she would pass it to her own daughter someday. "Keep it safe," Willow told her, her fingers lingering on the gold surface one last time. "Remember what it represents. Remember that we never know when a simple act of generosity might change a life, might create a love story that lasts generations." Adam and Willow grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing but their minds sharp and their love undiminished. They still took morning coffee on the porch when the weather allowed, still held hands when they walked, still looked at each other with the same affection and desire that had marked their early days together. The ranch hands, some of them new, some of them sons and grandsons of the original hands, treated them with deep respect, coming to them for advice and wisdom, knowing that the success of the Double Bar was built on the foundation Adam and Willow had laid decades before. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family threw a celebration that was talked about for years after. Every Granger descended from Adam and Willow came to the ranch, along with friends and neighbors from across the territory. There was food enough to feed an army, music and dancing, and toast after toast praising the couple who had built not just a ranch but a dynasty, not just a business but a family bound by love and loyalty. Adam stood to speak, his voice still strong despite his years. 50 years ago, he said, looking around at the sea of faces, many of them bearing some resemblance to him or to Willow. I walked into a general store in Ventura and saw a young woman trying to sell her most precious possession for food. I could have walked past, could have minded my own business, could have let the transaction happen without my interference. But something told me to stop, to help, to offer what I could. And that decision, that one small choice, gave me everything you see before you. It gave me Willow, the love of my life, my partner, my best friend. It gave me our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It gave me 50 years of happiness beyond anything I could have imagined. So, I want to say to all of you, never underestimate the power of kindness. Never walk past someone in need. Never assume that one moment cannot change everything, because it can. It did. And I thank God for it every single day. Willow stood beside him, tears streaming down her face, and when he finished, she took his hand and addressed the crowd herself. "Adam gave me back more than a locket that day," she said, her voice steady despite her emotion. "He gave me back my life, my hope, my future. He asked me to stay, and I have never regretted saying yes, not for one single day in 50 years. He has been my rock, my joy, my everything. And all of you, she gestured to the assembled family, you are the legacy of that love, the proof that something good and lasting can come from the darkest times. I love you all. I love this ranch. And I love this man more than words can say. The party continued long into the night, but eventually, Willow and Adam slipped away, walking hand in hand to their favorite spot, a rise that overlooked the ranch, where they could see the lights of the houses scattered across the property, could hear the faint sounds of music and laughter carrying on the evening breeze. 50 years, Adam said, pulling Willow close against the chill of the night air. It has gone so fast. And yet it feels like forever, Willow said, resting her head on his shoulder. The best kind of forever, the kind filled with love and laughter and family. Thank you, Adam, for asking me to stay all those years ago. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for saying yes, Adam replied, kissing the top of her head. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for being my wife, my partner, my love. I could not have done any of this without you, Willow. You are the heart of this family, the heart of this ranch. You are my heart. They stood together as the stars came out, thousands of brilliant points of light in the vast Arizona sky, the same stars that had shone on them that first night Willow had slept at the ranch, safe and fed and hopeful for the first time in weeks. So much had changed since then, but the stars remained constant, eternal, watching over them as they had always done. Years continued to pass, gentler now, measured in seasons and grandchildren's visits rather than the frenetic pace of earlier years. Adam's health began to fail when he was in his mid-70s, his heart growing weaker, his steps slower. He faced it with the same quiet strength he had brought to everything in his life, never complaining, always grateful for each new day with Willow and his family. Willow cared for him devotedly as he had always cared for her, and they spent their days together, reminiscing about their life, their love, their blessings. Adam died on a spring morning with Willow holding his hand and the windows open to let in the breeze that smelled of new grass and wildflowers. His last words were, "I love you," and Willow said them back, kissing his forehead as his breathing stilled and his hand relaxed in hers. She sat with him for a long time after, crying but also grateful, because they had been given 53 years together, decades of love and happiness that many people never experienced. The family gathered for Adam's funeral, filling the church in Ventura to overflowing, and he was laid to rest in the family cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a headstone that read Adam Granger, beloved husband, father, grandfather, friend. He asked her to stay and built a legacy of love. Willow lived 3 more years after Adam's death, years spent surrounded by her children and grandchildren, watching the ranch continue to thrive under James's management, seeing the family she and Adam had created continue to grow and flourish. She was content, grateful for the life she had lived, but she missed Adam with an ache that never quite faded. She wore his ring on a chain around her neck, alongside her mother's locket, the 2 most important people in her life always close to her heart. She died peacefully in her sleep one winter night, in the bed she had shared with Adam for over half a century, with Clara sitting beside her, holding her hand and singing the lullabies Willow had once sung to her. When they prepared her for burial, they found her wearing the locket and Adam's ring, and Clara made sure both were buried with her, knowing that her mother would want them with her always. They laid Willow to rest beside Adam, with a headstone that matched his. Willow Granger, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, friend. She stayed and created a home filled with love. The double bar continues to this day, still in the Granger family, still prosperous and thriving, a testament to the love of 2 people who found each other in desperate circumstances and chose to build something beautiful together. The story of how Adam and Willow met, how he gave back her locket and asked her to stay, is still told to new generations of Grangers, a reminder that love can bloom in the most unlikely places, that kindness can change lives, and that sometimes the best things come from the hardest times. In the house that Adam built and Willow made a home, there hangs a portrait of them, painted on their 40th anniversary. They are sitting on the porch, Adam's arm around Willow, both of them smiling at the artist with expressions of deep contentment and abiding love. Visitors to the ranch often comment on the portrait, on how the couple looks so happy, so perfectly matched, and the current generation of Grangers always tells the story of how they met, how a single act of kindness in a general store in Ventura, Arizona, in January of 1885, created a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, creating a legacy that continues to shape and bless the lives of all who came after. The locket, carefully preserved, is displayed in a place of honor in the main house, open to show both portraits. Willow's mother on one side, Adam on the other, the two people who had shaped her life most profoundly. Beside it is a card in Clara's handwriting that reads, "This locket was nearly traded for food in a moment of desperation. Instead, it became a symbol of love, of faith, of the belief that better days will come." May we all remember that our darkest moments can lead to our greatest blessings, and that love, true love, is always worth staying for. And so, the story of Adam and Willow lives on, a Wild West romance that began with hunger and desperation, and ended with a family dynasty and a love story for the ages, proving that sometimes the most profound changes in our lives come from the simplest acts of human kindness, and that asking someone to stay can be the beginning of everything.